When a crime is committed, because of the justice system that's in place, the person who committed that crime is usually given what society would define as a justified punishment. However, because crimes are committed on a day-to-day basis, it's not that surprising that sometimes we're left with no culprit, the wrong one, or someone we can't be too sure of. For that reason, I've decided to compile a list of just that. So sit back, relax, grab a Capri Sun, and join me for the 10 most mysterious crimes in history. Number 10 is the murder of Mary Money. In September of 1905, the body of a mutilated woman was found. She was found on a train track 1 hour after her death, and it was evident that she had been murdered. Although the evidence that she had been murdered was there, the investigation never led to the person who committed the crime. So the person leading the investigation decided to point at the train tracks instead, and stated that it was a high probability she had been run over by a train. This was unlikely, and even if it was the case, the question of was she thrown off the train was never answered. A prime suspect finally came into the case 7 years later in 1912, when the dark tendencies of Mary Money's brother, Robert Money, was brought to light. He went on to kill 6 people and shoot another. Because of this, many people wondered if Robert Money had any involvement in the death of his sister. However, this question remains unanswered. Number 9 is the artist. Tom Thomson was a successful Canadian artist in the early 20th century. After taking a canoeing trip in the summer of 1917, Thomson's body was discovered 8 days later. Since then, it's become an incredibly mysterious case. People have made quite a few accounts of this case, a lot of which contradicts the evidence presented in the original documents. Originally, it was said that he drowned. However, after a number of explorations were released that contradicted what was said, many people started to believe that this mightn't have been the case. Many people now believe that it was either suicide or murder. Regardless of what it was, it's become a very mysterious and interesting case, and a consistent amount of reports continue to flow in to this day, with the most recent one being released in 2011. Number 8 is the heist of Gardner Museum. In 1990, 2 men who appeared to be police officers managed to get into the Gardner Museum at 1 a.m. when it was closed because the person at the door thought that they were cops who were merely investigating a disturbance. This was not the case. The 2 men tied up the guy and proceeded to rob 13 paintings, which had a total value of $500 million, making it the largest theft of a private property building in history. It's a crime that shocked the world, because not only did they manage to break into one of the most well-guarded museums in the world, but also because today, around 26 or so years later, they have still not been caught. Empty frames now hang in the Gardner Museum where the paintings once were, and it remains a mystery as to how no information has been given on the heist, as the investigation remains ongoing and open, and the Gardner Museum are offering $5 million to anybody who can present said information. Regardless, this has come to no avail. Number 7 is the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa was a very powerful American labor union leader who also had a big involvement in organized crime. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison, but only served 5 of these and was released in 1971. 4 years later, in 1975, Jimmy Hoffa completely disappeared. Because of Hoffa's connections to both crime and politics, an array of different theories began to spawn after his disappearance. In 1989, the head of the FBI's Detroit office said that he knew what happened to Hoffa but couldn't say because there was too much at stake. 20 years later, in 2009, Richard Kuklinski wrote a book where he claimed he killed Hoffa and burned his body. However, a handful of people have come forth to say that they've killed Hoffa, so this cannot be confirmed. In fact, nothing can really be confirmed. It remains, to this day, one of the most mysterious and bizarre disappearances in American history. Number 6 is the boy in the box. In 1957, in Philadelphia, a boy aged 4 to 6 was found murdered in a box. Even after an incredibly thorough investigation, they were still unable to find any clues as to what happened. Not only that, but they also weren't able to find out the identity of the boy. There was a foster home around 1.5 miles away from where the boy was discovered. Although there was a slight bit of evidence, they were unable to put any definitive links between the boy's murder and the foster home. The second bit of evidence came from the woman known as M. In 2002, a woman who identified only as M came forth with a claim that her abusive mother purchased the boy and he was subjected to physical and sexual abuse for 2.5 years before he was killed in a fit of rage. She then dumped the boy in the area where the police found him. While the police did look into it, the woman known as M had a history of mental illness, and neighbors who had access to her home denied that there was ever a young boy living there. So her statements could not be used in a court of law, and the identity or the reasoning behind the boy in the box remains a mystery. Number 5 is the case of Steven Avery. If you haven't watched Making a Murderer yet and you still intend to, then I recommend you skip to this time. There won't be any major spoilers, but I have to tell you the gist of the situation, which might give away certain things about the show. In 1985, Steven Avery was convicted of first-degree sexual assault, attempted first-degree murder, and false imprisonment. 18 years later, in 2003, a DNA test was conducted, and it turns out that Steven Avery had not committed this crime. He was released from prison that year, but 2 years later, in November of 2005, he was charged with the murder of photographer Teresa Halbach. Because of the shady tactics used by the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office for the sexual assault conviction, there was already some suspicions that this conviction might have had some shady tactics as well. Throughout the duration of the trial, a lot of strange things started to occur, and it was established from the get-go that this was not a normal case. Steven Avery was eventually found guilty, but a lot of people are very much so on the fence as to whether he actually did it or not. If you want to formulate your own opinion on the subject, I recommend you watch the show, as it's a very complicated case and I wouldn't be able to mention every detail for this entry. Number 4 is the death of Julia Wallace. In 1931, a woman named Julia Wallace was murdered in Liverpool. The original person convicted of the murder was Julia Wallace's husband, William Wallace. However, the timing didn't add up, so the verdict was overturned. The night Julia Wallace was murdered, William Wallace received a call from somebody who told him to meet him at a certain location. He attempted to do so, but the location did not exist. When he returned home, he found his wife had been brutally murdered. Although there have been a few suspects, the person who committed the crime is still unknown. Another thing that is unknown is whether or not the phone call had something to do with the event. In the end, nobody was convicted of the murder, and the question of who killed Julia Wallace remains unanswered. Number 3 is the murder of Harry Oakes. After Harry Oakes made his wealth from the gold mines in Canada, he moved to the Bahamas to escape taxes. It was there where, in the summer of 1943, he was brutally murdered. This began a long and complicated trial that came to no avail. At first, Harry Oakes' stepson was arrested and charged with the murder. This is because a fingerprint of his was found at the crime scene. Also, he had a motive to do so because he was next in line to inherit Oakes' wealth. However, it turns out that that fingerprint had been planted, so Harry Oakes' stepson was set free. Another suspect was Harold Christie, who was Oakes' business partner. Christie owed money to Oakes that he could not repay, and he was also there the night that he died. Because of this, many people suspected that it was him. However, he was never charged. Finally, there was the Mafia, who had their differences with Oakes. However, this went no further than a mere speculation. Fingers were pointed in every single direction as to who killed Harry Oakes, and yet we've never been given a definitive answer. Number 2 is the case of Marilyn Sheppard. Sam Sheppard was charged and convicted for the brutal murder of his pregnant wife, Marilyn Sheppard, in 1954. The trial was not a fair one, due to the fact that the media picked up the story before Sam Sheppard was actually convicted. Because of this, he spent almost 10 years in prison before he was acquitted in 1966, after which he thoroughly searched for his wife's killer, before dying in 1970. The search continues today, however, as Sam Sheppard's son has continued looking for his mother's killer. However, this is yet to come to any avail. Number 1 is YOG TZE. Considered one of the most mysterious cases of all time because of the massive lack of evidence and also the strange components that go into this event. YOG TZE refers to the death of Gunther Stoll, a German food engineer. Prior to his death, he would occasionally speak to his wife about a group of people known as them. He claimed in a paranoid state that they were intending to kill him. And that very well may have been the case, because on the 26th of October 1984, he was found injured and naked in his car by 2 lorry drivers. On the way to the hospital, Gunther Stoll died. There's quite a bit of mystery behind this event. 4 or so hours before he died, he said the words "now I've got it" to his wife before writing YOGTZE on a piece of paper. As to what those series of letters mean, nobody has been able to give a definitive answer. Another mysterious thing that happened before his death was that when the drivers asked him what happened, he said that 4 men were in the car with him, and that they had, and I quote, "beat him loose." That merely added to the list of statements Stoll made that people did not know the meaning behind. It is still unclear what actually happened to him or how he died, and people have tried relentlessly to discover the meaning behind the letters YOGTZE for decades. But alas, we may never know. Whoa, that's it for this video. That took fucking 9 years to make. Thanks a million for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button. I'll leave a link down below to another video revolved around mysterious shite, and I hope you enjoyed your Capri Sun. Yeah, have a good one.